Welcome to Showdown. I'm Mark Kaysen, and it is Tuesday, and that's the 24th of September with 43 days left before the election. We are rapidly heading towards the end of Donald Trump. You know, there's a great article in the Washington Post today. Gene Daniels, the terrific report. I'm sorry, Gene Robinson, lost my mind. Gene Robinson in the Post-Dispatch. I'm sorry. Let's get it all straight. Gene Robinson in the Washington Post. Yes, he is a top editor for the Washington Post, and he's on Morning Joe each day with Joe Scarborough and Mika and the rest of that crew. Gene Robinson said, very appropriately, that he thinks that this election is not even close to where everybody is suggesting, which is that it's going to be tight and it could be a few votes here or there. And Robinson said, no, I don't think that's true at all. He said, I think that the polls are definitely not correct, which, you know, Donald wants to say, oh, no, none of these polls are right. I'm actually winning by a ton. And Robinson says, no, the polls may be wrong, but they may be wrong in the opposite direction. That instead of the polls indicating this tight race down to the finish line, that instead that there's a lot of evidence that Kamala is perhaps running away with all of this. Enormous advantage among young people, enormous advantage among women. In fact, there's only one group out here voting for Donald Trump: uneducated white men. You know, that isn't enough in 2024 to win an election, and certainly it's not enough to be even close. So be careful, Donald, because all of your beliefs about how the polls may be wrong, well, that might be true, but it might be the exact opposite of what you think, that the polls may be really tilted in the wrong direction, that it's not indicating that you have a close race, that instead it's just they're wrong. The polls are wrong. Now, when I say wrong, don't misunderstand. Donald is losing everywhere. He's losing in battleground states. He's losing certainly in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. There he's losing by 4, 5, 6%. I mean, those are big numbers. Those polls in those states are supposed to be dead even. And in fact, Donald was ahead until Joe Biden got out of the race. Now it's a completely different situation. And really, Donald is desperate because he probably sees not only the bad polls that are public, which are really pointing in the wrong direction for him, as explained by Robinson. But what's more, these polls are perhaps missing the opposite problem that existed for Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, the polls were not capturing everything because there were a lot of people who didn't want to say that they were voting for Donald Trump. And therefore, in the end, when Hillary won by millions of votes, millions, she wasn't ahead enough in order to carry the Electoral College. But see, at this point in 2024, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe there are people in the Republican Party who are afraid to say, I'm not voting for Donald Trump. That perhaps they're saying they are because they don't want people chasing after them. They don't want to be threatened, possibly death. I mean, that's what's going on out here. Donald's threatening to kill everybody. Anybody that looks at him the wrong way, you could be killed. How about what he had to say yesterday about immigrants? Very simple. Get them the hell out. Get them the hell out. Nice talk. Then his Hitler-esque crowds scream in the background. The only thing they're missing is a lot of flags with swastikas yelling, send them back. Send them back. And Donald's sitting there like he's some kind of a conductor of a symphony. This is not a recipe for winning an election in the United States. And frankly, all that Donald is doing here, and he is doing this, he's scaring the hell out of some people. Now, that's a fact. There are some people who are very frightened because they've seen the threats. They've seen the threats in Springfield, Ohio, where they're shutting down schools and hospitals because Donald is just revving these people up to kill. To kill. I mean, they don't shut these things down because they think that there's going to be a play date. That's not what they're doing. They're not saying, okay, look, we're going to go out and have some fun together, so let's just shut this thing down for a minute. No, they're sending the kids home from schools, and they're sending seriously ill patients out of hospitals because Donald's people are threatening to blow everything up. Over what? Some dogs that aren't being eaten? So, you could say, well, Kaysen, you're losing your mind. What are you so upset about? They're shutting the place down. They're shutting down Springfield, Ohio. And listen, Mike DeWine, who is a Republican governor, was begging in the newspapers, wrote an article begging the Trump people to stop it, to walk away and allow his city to operate. That is the city of Springfield, Ohio. Now, this is the governor for the entire state, but he's concerned for the safety of people in Springfield, Ohio. And all Donald's got to say is, get the hell out. And Mike DeWine is saying, Donald Trump, stop it. You're endangering people's lives. That's the Republican governor. So if you don't get that one, I don't know what to tell you. This is supposedly his group, his side. But they know what's going on. And then, what does Donald say? Well, he doesn't back down from anything. That's not Donald Trump. He says that Kamala is a communist. And he didn't just say it once, and he didn't say it nice. He is frightened out of his mind. He doesn't know what to do because he knows that not only is he on the way to losing this election, but he may be on the way to losing his freedom. They'll put him in jail. No one will ever hear from him again. And it's not because somebody wants to weaponize something. I hate that word. I mean, I only use it in a sense of repeating what Donald says, because this weaponizing nonsense is just that, nonsense. No one's doing it. We are not using the justice system improperly. And in fact, it's the opposite. Everybody knows that Donald Trump has received a degree of treatment, of protection from the system, which nobody in the United States, not a regular person, would ever be able to achieve, because we just don't do this. I mean, when you're a convicted felon, you're in trouble. In Donald's case, he just walks around and says whatever he wants, stirring up hatred and division and really threats to kill. 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 Students in schools, sick people in hospitals. You think anybody wants this for the next 4 years? I don't believe it. And I think that's why Kamala Harris's polls are very positive. But as Eugene Robinson says, maybe the polls are missing some of this. Maybe they're too negative. You can read about it in the Washington Post today. I think it's a great argument, and I think it's worth the time to read it. You know, Robinson is not just some guy with a typewriter. He is a longtime editor at the Washington Post. He knows what he's talking about. He's a smart man. And by the way, and you know I've been saying this, and Robinson likewise is speaking to this from time to time in the last few days, and that's this polling which shows that black people are maybe going to give Donald 7%. Now, just so you understand, the Democratic Party typically loses 10%, 9, 8, 10, 11, somewhere in there, around 10. When you start dropping down to Donald Trump receiving only 7%, that's 93% for the Democrats. You're talking about landslide territory. And of course, Donald says still, repeatedly, that he's going to get 28% of the black vote. Where he came up with that number, well, I'll tell you where he came up with it. I know exactly. And we're going to talk about it in a little bit, because he's trotting out these numbers for other things as well. And they are things that are absolutely the biggest lies that are possible. I mean, it's the kind of thing that if you're a Republican who believes in Trump, you could believe in this nonsense. But if you're a regular, educated human being on this planet, you would know that what Donald is saying is just a flat out lie. But we're going to get to that. I mean, we know he's lying about the dogs. We know he's lying about Kamala being a communist. Come on, a communist? No. A liberal? Okay. Somewhat progressive? Sure. A communist? I mean, a communist has far different meanings. I mean, these people, if they don't like you, they say you're a communist. Well, that's something the John Birch Society used 70 years ago. And as well, so did Joe McCarthy 70 years ago. They prevented writers in Hollywood from being paid for their films. They prevented actors from even participating in their films. And these weren't necessarily people who were communists anyway. These were people who said, I'm not going to comment on what someone else is doing because I don't have an obligation to, and you can't force this. This is not Russia. You can't make me tell you something that someone told me in confidence, or you can't even get me to tell you something that I might think or suspect. No, you can't do it. Certainly, Joe McCarthy pushed all that, and it worked for a while until McCarthy was disgraced. And when he was disgraced, he was deposited on the ash heap of history where dictators or wannabe dictators like that belong. Donald's headed for that same ash heap, and the things that he's saying are so bizarre that even calling Kamala a communist, well, that's not even close to how bad Donald can actually be. But we'll get there in a second. There are other things he has said today. He has said that Volodymyr Zelensky in Ukraine, who is currently at the United States in order to talk to people at the United Nations about what he can get in terms of support for his people. And essentially, and I shouldn't even say essentially because he said it exactly. Yeah, exactly. Trump said that Zelensky comes to the United States and takes billions of dollars from us every time he gets here. $60 billion? Well, absolutely he does. Now, that's the truth. He does take that money, gets it. He gets it as support because the United States first promised Ukraine in the 1990s that we would defend them if they turned over nuclear weapons for us to dismantle. And the purpose of it all was pretty simple, trying to protect the world from nuclear weapons that could have created problems even when no one wanted to use them as part of a war. So we wanted to protect people, just make sure that they were safe, because we knew how to shut all that material down, and the Ukrainians did not. They were just not up to it. They didn't have the scientific technology. They couldn't do it. And they knew that. So they asked for help. They said, look, we'll give you those weapons to dismantle because you know how to do them. You know how to get rid of this. And we don't want it in our hands anyway. But we do want your protection in the future. And the United States said, definitely yes. Now, of course, Donald wants to back away from all of it. He wants to say, that was then and this is now. You can't have our protection anymore unless you pay for it. You know what that is? That is a mafia protection racket. And I can tell you right now, that's part of what's going on in Georgia, where there's a lawsuit. It's sort of on hold, but it's coming back. And I'll tell you, it's coming back with a vengeance. This is not going away. Donald's going to pay a price in Georgia. Now, it's not going to happen before the election. Okay, that's all right. We know where we're going right now. We're going into an election that's going to determine whether the United States is a democracy or a dictatorship operating under the control of, I guess, the new Soviet Union. I guess that's sort of the idea that Vladimir Putin has. And I got to tell you, it's not going to work any better for him than it worked for the first Soviet Union many years ago. They are incompetent. They lie, which is what Donald does. And I don't know whether we could say that Donald is a liar and they picked up some of it from him, or whether they are liars, which they always have been, and he's picking it up from them, or maybe a combination. But I can tell you this. Volodymyr Zelensky is a hero in his country. And he's also a hero among many people around the world for his resistance against today's Adolf Hitler. Now, you might say, listen, Kaysen, everybody can't be Hitler. Either Donald is Hitler or Putin is Hitler, but not both. One's in charge of the other. Okay, well, maybe. Maybe Putin's Hitler and Donald is just a stooge. Could be. Or maybe in their own way, they're both Hitler. We do know this. Donald has promised us the unified Reich. That's not pig Latin, guys. That is Donald's idea of German fascism. It's not pretty, and we don't need it in this country. It's not what we do. Okay, so here's the thing. Out of desperation, Donald is looking for anything he can say that would stop Kamala Harris's tremendous rise to power, which we're seeing every single day. And she's not all bent out of shape over anything. She's just a nice lady that's got some hard-hitting ideas in terms of trying to fix this country. She's talking about controlling the cost of goods that might be part of a gouging process among corporations. She's trying to control housing costs by increasing the housing base. I mean, all of this is capitalism. Totally. Trying to influence the market. And it's not pure capitalism, but it's capitalism. Because this idea of influencing the market has been used before very effectively. And in this case, it could make a significant difference. Now, let's contrast that to what Donald is saying. Donald's got some really interesting capitalist theories. So let's try John Deere Company. John Deere and Company is an agricultural firm that produces all kinds of tractors and various equipment in order for people to farm, to grow crops, to add to the farming economy in the United States. You need the equipment from John Deere. Now, there's some other companies out here. You've got some version of International Harvester laying around out there. You've got Tractor Supply Company. I mean, there are some other companies out here. They're all competing. But Donald thinks he's found something, and that is that Deere, I mean, this is a major company in America, that they are building some plants in Mexico. Now, we do have companies that do business in Mexico, and it's legal. But Donald is saying, in his true insane fashion, that he's going to stop them, that he's going to control these companies, and he's going to make sure that they bring everything back to the United States and create jobs for Americans. Now, the problem is there aren't any unions that are buying this. I understand that the Teamsters have agreed not to endorse Kamala Harris, but they haven't endorsed Donald. And the other side is the UAW is strongly endorsing Kamala Harris. And the reason that that's important is because union members are available to go out and work at the polls and to bring people to the polls and to call people on the phone in order to suggest that they consider voting for Kamala Harris. I mean, this is a normal playbook for any party that knows what they're doing, and the Democratic Party is doing a fine job of it all. And they are, well, just being political, which you would be in the time when you've got an election coming. That's what you're supposed to do. Donald, on the other hand, is throwing around some very insane threats. For example, he says that if Deere doesn't fall into line, that he's going to come into office and throw 200% tariffs on everything that Deere is doing. Now, understand this. We don't even put 200% tariffs on China, who we claim to be at war with in some financial sense. We don't put those kind of tariffs on Russia, who we frankly, we're fighting Russia. So we definitely want to do things to stop them, but not 200% tariffs. And we're not putting 200% tariffs on anybody. No one around the world is getting 200% tariffs, but John Deere, because Donald is declaring war against American corporations. Now, that's interesting for somebody who claims that Kamala Harris is a communist. Declaring war against American business. That is brilliant. But you know, it does not end there. Because Donald came up with another idea this afternoon, and this is really brilliant. Donald says that if you make him president, that in 12 months, he will reduce energy prices by 50%. Now, listen again to what he said, because I want you to understand what's going on here. Donald says he will reduce energy prices by 50% in 12 months after he is elected president. Now, you understand this, I think, I hope. He can't do this. No human being on the planet can push energy prices down 50% in 12 months. In fact, you might not be able to get them down 10% in 12 months. Now, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. The price of gas could drop 10%. It could drop 50%. But it won't happen because of something that Donald Trump says he's going to do. First of all, is that capitalism? And the answer, of course, is no. That isn't free markets. That's lunacy. Understand this. It's insane. There is no possibility that this man can push energy prices down by 50% in 12 months. He can't do it. Michael writes, the total amount spent on energy will be down, but because he's going to deport so many immigrants, so he's spinning his talk as usual. And Michael, of course, I mean, you're just making the point in a little different way, but it all amounts to the same thing. None of this is anything he can do. We know that energy production in the United States has been soaring for 3.5 years, straight up. We produce more oil than any country in the world. And on top of that, we are energy independent. So it's lunacy to say that you're going to do what he claims, because there's only one way that you can get the price of oil to fall that far. And this I do believe he could do. Donald could do this. If you send the United States into a depression, well, then you could probably knock the price of oil down 50%. You know, right now we pay here in St. Louis $2.80 for gas, and I believe you could get gas down to $1.40 in a serious recession or depression. And believe me, you throw these tariffs on everything, you're going to have a depression. But Kamala wouldn't do that. Donald says he will. Greg asks, what's your opinion about Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, Bank of America, Vanguard, and Temasek? Well, what's my opinion about them? They're companies. What could my opinion be? I don't know. Is there something that Donald is threatening to do to these people that I don't know? None of these people are doing anything especially wrong. I won't say that everything they do every day is completely moral. Banks are banks. They're trying to make money. We have something called the CPFB, the Consumer Protection Financial Bureau, which is out here in order to protect Americans from these countries being abusive. These companies being abusive in terms of all different kinds of fees and ways of doing business. But other than that, I'm not sure what you're asking me. Oh, all of them are under investigation? You know something? Greg, I think you know this. Companies are under investigation all the time. Always. That's normal. Apple's under investigation. Microsoft is under investigation. I mean, everybody's always looking to see if any of these companies are acting illegally under antitrust laws. I mean, that's normal. So what's my opinion? My opinion is that the Consumer Protection Financial Bureau will take a look at anything that it finds and make decisions about whether people at these companies are acting within our laws. And if they are, they'll be fine. Oh, owners of John Deere. Well, first of all, owners of John Deere are people like me and you, Greg, and I know you know that. So be careful how you use the words. What you're talking about is top corporate executives at John Deere, because John Deere is a public corporation that is owned by investors. You know, if you own 5 shares of John Deere, you know, a several $100 a share company, then that, you know, are you saying that your next door neighbor is under investigation? The answer is no, because they are the owners of John Deere. The chief executive officer of John Deere doesn't own it. He is one of the owners because he owns shares, but he's not the owner. I'm just saying, let's get it right. Greg says, no, the majority shareholders are the 5. Let me say this. You got it all wrong, and that's okay. It's all right. It's not a problem. You don't mean any harm. I'm just saying, John Deere's a public company. People who own 5 shares are owners. And those aren't the people who are perhaps causing a problem. And there is the potential for antitrust investigation for all of these companies. You've got a very small number of corporations that produce the kind of equipment that we use in farming across the United States. And so as a result, it is possible that a company like this could be not obeying the law. I mean, I don't know why you're fighting me about this, Greg. Look it up. I mean, I don't have to look it up. I'm an expert. I know what they are. Tell me that these companies aren't owned by people with 5 shares of stock. They are. It's the executives who are making the decisions, and their decisions could violate antitrust laws. And if they do, then they'll be dealt with. But not with 200% tariffs. That's lunacy. That's the United States government or the president of the United States going to war against our corporations. We don't do that. And we're not going to do that. And Donald Trump is not going to do it because he's not going to be president of anything except for possibly the Prisoners Association. I always like to point that out. Michael says, did you see him today? I think it was his first time in a grocery store ever. He was handing out $100 bills. And I believe he would do that. And that is pretty cynical, isn't it? But listen, that's the least of our problems with Donald Trump, because he's out here lying to the country by saying he's going to drop the price of gas, oil, natural gas. He's going to drop all this stuff. What? 50%? No, he's not. Not unless he brings this country down around all our ears. Yeah, Greg says that's why Trump is fighting them to stay in the USA. Thus, why he said companies outside the USA will be subject to tariffs. Greg, listen to what I said. This would be a war in the United States against our corporations. And if Kamala said she wanted to do this, they would tell you the same thing that they're saying right now anyway. They would say she's a communist. We don't go to war against our companies. That's no way to build this country up. That is absolutely a way to tear this country down. So, no, I'm not going to buy into your argument here that Donald is doing the right thing, because you know something? These companies that are producing things outside of America, I can promise you they are operating under arrangements that we have made with the rest of the world, and they are not violating our laws. Now, if you want to change the laws, that's okay. You can do that. But not go to war against these companies with 200% tariffs. You would put our major corporations out of business. Who would hire our workers? Where would they work? You kill our corporations. You kill the United States economy. And then explain to me, where will people work? It is stupidity. And I promise you, there isn't a president out of all 46 of them who is capable or was capable of bringing the price of energy down 50% at any time. It's just not doable. The only way you could do it is to destroy our economy. Now, that would do it. No problem there. You get yourself a big drop in the stock market, and you get yourself all kinds of disruption, and you could do it. I mean, I'm sure, Greg, as smart as you are, you probably know that a number of years back, the price of oil went negative in a financial panic. And so the price of oil, which had been, up to $150 a gallon, dropped to minus 40. Now, just so you understand, in minus 40, you get the oil and the market pays you the $40. You don't pay $40 for the oil. The market pays you for the 40. And that actually happened, minus 40. But that's in a financial panic. I'm telling you, this is not something that we want, and it's not something that any president could do. But I will tell you what we can do. We can go to dinner at Wendy's. We could do that. That you can do any day of the week at 18,000 Chesterfield Airport Road. And I promise you, you will find bargains. Now, Donald's not going to bring the price of everything there down 50%. And he's not going to go to war against Wendy's because he's not going to be president of anything anyway. But Wendy's doesn't want to go to war with you. Wendy's wants to feed you, and they're going to really feed you well. They've got wings. They've got smoked meat. They've got hamburgers, cheeseburgers, patty melts with lots of onions. I love it. They've got salad, pizza, and they've got the best baby back ribs that you're ever going to find anywhere. And then you throw in those onion rings, and you've got some great meals at Wendy's. Once again, 18,000 Chesterfield Airport Road. That's Wendy's here in the Valley. And don't forget, you can go to Defiance and get the same great food at $29.99 South Highway 94 in Defiance. That is Wendy's with the great food and the great environment, thanks to Ben and his wife, who have created a terrific business. That is Wendy's. Now, if you're looking for really good jewelry deals, then you want to get yourself to 4506 Hampton, and you will get great deals on all different kinds of jewelry. It's in the cases. You'll see it in there all through this giant area where they have all the jewelry on display. And then after that, well, you can talk to Al and AJ about, for example, designing jewelry, or you could talk to them about making deals when you're buying and selling jewelry and coins, because they do all of that at Jewels on Hampton. And then when you're all through, when it's all said and done, you can get your watch fixed at Wendy's. They do it all. When it comes to jewelry, this is the place to be. 4506 Hampton, and that is Jewels on Hampton. Now, men's clothing. You go to Clayton, and you go to the corner of Forsyth and Central, and you're going to find the St. Louis Suit Company. The St. Louis Suit Company has been there for 30 years. And believe me, the clothing is top quality. The prices are low. And even if that weren't true, which it is, you can't beat the ties. I have so many ties. I love my ties. I really enjoy them. In fact, everybody loves having ties. Everybody doesn't wear them all the time, but it is kind of fun. So anyway, when you go to St. Louis Suit Company, you can go to the St. Louis Suit Company, get great clothing, and then you can go down the street, out here in Chesterfield Valley and go get some great dinner at Wendy's. And while you're eating, they'll be fixing your clothing up, and you'll just have a great old time with our terrific advertisers. And at the same time, you might be thinking about Italian food. Well, if you are, then you want to get over to 141 and Olive, because there you can go to Telena's. Telena's has been there for 40 years. Great pizza, great pasta. But believe me, and I've tried everything there, and like I say, 40 years, you got time to try it all. There's nothing like their spaghetti and meatballs. It's the best. Now, we always call Friday Spaghetti and Meatballs Day at Telena's, but you can buy it any day. And you can also go there or call them, and they'll cater for you. They'll put together giant orders and send them out to you, and people love it. I can tell you, I've gone out with Medi on deliveries before, and I can assure you, people love when you deliver all this great Italian food all over town, and sometimes even hundreds of miles out of town, because that's the extent of how people feel about Telena's. So keep them in mind. Medi is the guy, and Telena's is in Creve Coeur, 141 and Olive, and their food is terrific. We got great people here. There's no doubt about that. Okay. Now, I want you to understand that there are other problems out here besides even the ones I've talked about so far today. For example, there is Donald Trump's difficulties in the Washington, D.C. case where Tanya Chutkan is the judge. And Judge Chutkan was approached by Donald's lawyers with the idea they throw the whole thing out. Just get rid of it. I mean, Aileen Cannon could do it. So come on, just throw it out. Well, that one didn't fly. Now, the next idea was to see if they could prevent Jack Smith and his prosecutors from presenting evidence to the court so that they could try to make some decisions about which ideas, which areas of prosecution might hold up under the immunity decision made by Donald's good friends on the Supreme Court. But that's okay. I mean, there are rules here and you follow them. And Jack Smith is a very top flight lawyer. He knows what he's doing. He came in here with an idea that, he would put a superseding indictment into place, which only means simply you change the indictment, you change what is being prosecuted. And in this case, he narrowed it down to a level where he felt that he would be more on solid ground in dealing with this idiotic immunity decision that came from the Supreme Court. So it's not like he said, just throw everything out, which is what Donald says. But he said, look, let's see if we can operate within the immunity decision, which, I mean, that's just what a lawyer would do. So Tanya Chutkan sort of took a look at the arguments on both sides. And again, Jack Smith came to the court and said, look, we've narrowed this indictment, and now we want to bring the evidence to the court so the court can decide what is appropriate and what isn't. Well, Donald's upset because in that process, information could be provided to the public regarding what Donald has done, his behavior, things which might make people not want to vote for him for the presidency. Now, I'll grant you, and Donald should know this, even if you tell everything that Donald did, it's very highly probable that the people who love him will never back away. They'll just hang in there. You know, all the uneducated white voters who support him, that's men, not women, and they will stick it out all the way to the end. No doubt about it. But there aren't enough of them to win an election against Kamala Harris, who has got white women, black women, black men. You know, Donald said, oh, no, those black men are for me. Well, turns out not exactly. And in fact, you look at the entire black population, and what you find is that Donald's got 7%. That's less than he had in 2016 and 2020. 7%. That's not good. And one of the things I've said a long time here, despite what maybe America thinks, black people aren't stupid. Women aren't stupid. Young people are not stupid. Young people are saying that they're going to vote in favor of Kamala Harris by more than a 25% margin. That's enormous. Now, it was better for Donald before when he had Joe Biden, but he hasn't got Joe Biden anymore. And you know that Joe Biden was struggling. That was the problem. He's a good man. He spoke today at the United Nations. He's really one of our best presidents when it comes to foreign policy. He's done a tremendous job with NATO, and everybody around the world has high respect for him. Well, not Viktor Orban and not Vladimir Putin and not Xi Jinping and not the dictators of the world, Kim Jong-un and the rest of them. No, they don't. But don't worry. The respectable people who believe in freedom, yeah, they support Joe Biden. They like him. Not as president. They just support him as a good person who has done a fine job as the president of the United States. And that's why those 154 scholars called Joe Biden number 14 in all presidents throughout our history. Number 14. These aren't people trying to advocate in an election for somebody. They're just people who are out here, scholars, intellectuals at universities who are trying to say, here's what we see here. We see a very good president who has accomplished a lot. And so today he had his last big speech in front of the world community. And I think that people respect him. They like him. Not because he's running, just because he's a good person. Not the head of a crime family. That was all so silly in the first place. A crime family. You know, he was the head of a crime family who had manipulated the entire world, and the only problem is that he had dementia and didn't know where he was or who he was, or he couldn't put two sentences together. But somehow he was able to create this unbelievable crime family, which, as Mary Trump says all the time, when Donald says these things, all he's doing is projecting because it's him. He is the crime family. He is the racketeer. He is the fraudster who owes the state of New York $500 million, and the rapist who owes E. Jean Carroll $90 million. So, do you get it? I understand. People say, oh, those trials were rigged. Those were kangaroo courts. No, they were grand juries who presented indictments and prosecutors who prosecuted cases and judges and juries who made the decisions that basically amount to the backbone of American justice. Is it perfect? No. Is it the best in the world? Undoubtedly. Is it something that we swear in the United States to abide by? And the answer is yes. And if you abide by the laws and values and morality of the United States government, I'm not talking about the people who break the law or the people who stretch the law or the people who do the wrong thing. None of those. I'm just talking about the basic principles of American justice. Those principles say that if you are a convicted felon, you're not a good guy. That's pretty simple. And listen, it's even worse. It's even worse. It's hard to believe that it could get worse, but it's even worse. So, for example, in Georgia, there are fights underway to change the way that the votes are counted in order to give Donald the opportunity to deny a win to Kamala Harris when she wins. That's what it's about, you all. And you want to know the truth about it? You want to follow the details? None of this is hidden. October the 10th, there is a trial in Georgia on television. You won't miss it. You can get every detail on this. You'll know it all. Greg asks me here in the last couple minutes, where's the interest rate for a home today? And where was it January 1st of 2021? That is all foolishness. This has nothing to do with Joe Biden, not even remotely anything to do with Joe Biden. The price of gasoline was down in the $1.50 range because of COVID. Everybody knows that. There was no demand. No one was going anywhere. We sat home. When you don't buy gas, when you don't go anywhere in your car, the price of gasoline goes down just as the stock market plunged in the middle of COVID. Is this supposed to be something that you think is going to somehow save Donald from his obvious fate? Because, Greg, it won't work. The guy's going down. He is losing this election. He is on his way to the end of MAGA. Whatever the heck that is anyway. Well, we know what it is. It's basically fascism, which, you know, the United States flirted with it before World War II, but then came December 7th, 1941, and everybody said, you know what? Charles Lindbergh and the rest of these guys, go take a hike because we're going to fight Adolf Hitler in the same way that we're fighting today against Vladimir Putin. We're not stupid. We're not stupid. Okay. And you're not stupid either, because I know that while you're listening to the end of this tonight, you're thinking about Wendy's. You're thinking about Jules on Hampton. You're thinking about the great Italian food at Telena's. And you're thinking about the great men's clothing at the St. Louis Suit Company. And I'm thinking about getting out of here and coming back tomorrow. I'm Mark Kaysen. This is Showdown.